The night air at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport carried the metallic tang of jet fuel and the constant rumble of engines. Sarah Collins adjusted her tactical earpiece and scanned the sprawling tarmac through her night vision binoculars. Beside her, Max sat perfectly still, his dark eyes fixed on the private aviation sector 300 yards away. The Belgian Malinois wore his custom Mi-6 tactical vest, matte black with integrated sensor arrays that made him look like something between a working dog and a piece of advanced military hardware. "Control, this is Agent 07, Sarah whispered into her encrypted comm. "We're in position on the northwest perimeter. Target hangar is Foxtrot 7. No visual on suspects yet." The response crackled in her ear. "Copy that, 007. Satellite shows heat signatures inside the hangar. 3 vehicles arrived 40 minutes ago. Stay dark and observe." Sarah lowered the binoculars and glanced at Max. The dog's ears were forward, his body language tense but controlled. She'd worked with him for 7 years before joining MI6 and another 18 months since becoming the new 007. She could read his body language better than most people's facial expressions. "What do you smell, boy?" she murmured. Max's nose twitched. His enhanced sensory equipment, installed discreetly in his tactical vest, was feeding data directly to Sarah's wrist display. Chemical signatures scrolled across the small screen: aviation fuel, hydraulic fluid, gunpowder residue, and something else. Something organic that the system flagged as pharmaceutical compounds. Sarah frowned. "Control. Max is picking up medical or chemical signatures at the target location. Recommend upgrading threat assessment." Acknowledged. Standing by. The mission had started 3 days ago when MI6 intercepted fragmented communications, suggesting the Syndicate was planning an operation at the world's busiest airport. The terrorist organization had been quiet since Sarah and Max had disrupted their weapons shipment in Prague 2 months earlier. Too quiet. M had deployed them to Atlanta with one directive: find out what the Syndicate was planning before it was too late. Sarah checked her watch. 2,300 hours. Most of the airport's legitimate activity had wound down, leaving only cargo operations and the occasional red-eye departure. The private aviation sector was normally bustling with corporate jets and wealthy travelers, but tonight, Hangar Foxtrot 7 sat isolated and suspiciously dark, despite the vehicles inside. Through her earpiece, she heard a new voice. 07, this is Q Branch. We've been analyzing the encrypted traffic you flagged earlier. We've cracked about 30% of it. You need to hear this." A recording played in her ear. The audio quality was poor, filtered through layers of digital encryption, but she could make out fragments. "Package secured, departure window 23:30, target destination unknown, no traces." "Package?" Sarah echoed. "They're moving something tonight." "Or someone," Q's voice replied grimly. "We're cross-referencing with Interpol missing persons reports now. Stand by." Max suddenly stood, his muscles coiling with tension. Sarah immediately trusted his instincts and dropped into a crouch beside him. Through the darkness, she saw movement at Hangar Foxtrot 7. The massive door was sliding open, spilling fluorescent light across the concrete apron. Sarah raised her binoculars. 3 black SUVs were parked inside the hangar, arranged around a sleek Gulfstream G650 private jet. Men in tactical gear moved with military precision, carrying equipment cases up the jet's boarding stairs. She counted 6 operatives, all armed with compact submachine guns. But it was the 7th figure that made Sarah's blood run cold. A woman in her 50s, grey-haired and wearing a rumpled pantsuit, was being dragged toward the aircraft. Her hands were zip-tied in front of her, and even from this distance, Sarah could see the fear in her body language. The woman stumbled on the stairs, and one of the operatives roughly shoved her forward. "Control, I have visual confirmation of a hostage." Sarah reported, her voice tight with controlled anger. Caucasian female, 50s, civilian clothing, restrained and under duress. They're loading her onto the jet now. Copy that, 007. We have an ID from Interpol. Dr. Elena Volkov, age 53, Russian-born British citizen. She's a biochemist specializing in viral weaponization. She was reported missing from her hotel in Geneva 72 hours ago. Sarah's mind raced. A kidnapped weapons scientist, the Syndicate, a private jet preparing for immediate departure. This wasn't just surveillance anymore. This was an active extraction that would put a brilliant mind in the hands of terrorists. What's the play, Control? Sarah asked. If we move now, we risk losing intel on their network. But if we let that jet take off, we're working on authorization for interdiction, Control interrupted. The Americans are being difficult about jurisdiction. Stand by. Sarah watched the operatives finish loading the jet. The woman, Dr. Volkov, was visible through one of the passenger windows, slumped in a seat with a guard standing over her. The jet's engines began to spool up, the high-pitched whine cutting through the night air. Control. They're preparing for departure. I need authorization now. Negative 007. The FBI wants to handle this as a domestic operation. We're still negotiating. There's no time for negotiation, Sarah snapped. That jet will be wheels up in 5 minutes. Max growled softly beside her, sensing her frustration. She placed a hand on his back, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. In that moment, she thought about James Bond, the man who'd trained her, who'd seen something in a K-9 officer from Atlanta that made him recommend her as his successor. She remembered his advice during one of their final training sessions. Being 007 isn't about following every rule. It's about knowing which rules to break and when. Through her binoculars, Sarah saw the jet beginning to move. The operatives were closing the door. Ground crew members, probably paid off or threatened, were removing wheel chocks. Control, the aircraft is mobile, requesting immediate authorization for interdiction. Negative 007, stand down and maintain surveillance. That's an order. Sarah lowered the binoculars and looked at Max. The dog met her gaze with absolute trust. 7 years of partnership, 18 months as 007. Every mission, every risk, every impossible situation, they'd faced it together. She made her decision. Control, this is Agent 007, Sarah said calmly. I'm going to lose you for a moment. Radio interference. Do you copy? She switched off her comm before they could respond. Max, she said quietly, we've got work to do. The Belgian Malinois stood immediately, his body vibrating with controlled energy. Sarah pulled out her tactical tablet and quickly plotted a route across the tarmac. The jet was taxiing toward the main runway, following a service road that would take it past the cargo terminals. If they moved fast, they could intercept it before it reached the active runway. But then what? She couldn't stop a private jet with small arms fire, not without risking Dr. Volkov's life, and calling in airport security would alert the Syndicate, possibly triggering a hostage situation or worse. Sarah watched the jet's navigation lights moving steadily through the darkness. The Gulfstream G650 had a maximum takeoff weight of over 99,000 pounds. Once it started its takeoff roll, nothing short of a catastrophic emergency would make the pilot abort. Her eyes fell on Max, and suddenly an idea formed. Crazy, dangerous, probably career-ending if it went wrong, but it might be the only way to save Dr. Volkov. Max, Sarah said, pulling out a specialized remote from her vest. Remember Prague, the truck intercept? Max's ears perked forward. He remembered. Sarah activated her comm, knowing she'd face consequences later. Control, this is 007. I have a plan to stop that aircraft, but you're not going to like it. I need you to trust me and coordinate with Tower immediately. We're going to force an abort. Negative, 07, what are you... Sarah switched to a different frequency. Hartsfield Tower, this is Agent Sarah Collins, MI6, badge number 07 Delta Charlie. I am declaring a security emergency. You have an aircraft taxiing to runway 27 left that is transporting a kidnapped scientist. I need you to hold all traffic on that runway immediately. There was a shocked pause. Then, "Ma'am, we need proper authorization." "There's no time. That jet is carrying Dr. Elena Volkov, a kidnapping victim. Check your Interpol alerts. I'm sending authentication now." Sarah transmitted her credentials while watching the jet continue its taxi. The tower controller came back on, his voice tense. "Authentication confirmed. But ma'am, the aircraft is already cleared for departure. We can't just—" "Hold that runway," Sarah commanded. "I'm going to make sure they don't take off." She knelt beside Max and looked into his intelligent eyes. "You ready to be a hero again, boy?" Max's tail wagged once. That was all the confirmation she needed. Sarah stood and began running toward the perimeter fence, Max keeping pace beside her. The jet was accelerating now, turning onto the taxiway that led directly to the active runway. Through her tablet, she tracked its position and calculated intercept vectors. This was insane. This was against protocol. This would probably get her fired. But Sarah Collins hadn't become 007 by playing it safe. She reached the fence and used her laser cutter to slice through the chain link. Max squeezed through the gap first, then waited as Sarah followed. Together, they sprinted across the dark tarmac toward the runway where the Gulfstream would make its final turn. The jet's engines grew louder, landing lights blazed in the darkness. Sarah's heart pounded as she ran, knowing she had maybe 90 seconds before that aircraft reached takeoff speed. "Max," she said between breaths, "when I give the signal, you know what to do." The Belgian Malinois surged ahead, his powerful legs eating up the distance. Sarah followed, her mind focused on one thought: save Dr. Volkov, no matter the cost. In the distance, the Gulfstream's lights grew brighter. The runway stretched out before them like a challenge, and Sarah Collins, Agent 007, was about to do something that would either save a life or end her career. Possibly both. Sarah's lungs burned as she sprinted across the tarmac, her tactical boots pounding against the concrete in rhythm with Max's powerful strides. The Gulfstream G650 was making its final turn onto the runway approach, its turbines whining with increasing intensity. Through her night vision display, she could see the cockpit illuminated, the pilots running through their pre-takeoff checklist with mechanical precision. 60 seconds. Maybe less. "Control, do you copy?" Sarah gasped into her comm, having switched it back on. "I need Tower to understand what's about to happen." The response was immediate and furious. "Adjuro 7, what the hell are you doing? We explicitly ordered you to stand down." "Saving a life," Sarah shot back. "Now either help me or stay out of my way." She glanced at her tactical tablet while running. The Gulfstream's transponder showed it was designated as Flight November 7 Charlie Tango X, filed for a flight plan to Caracas, Venezuela, a country with no extradition treaty. Once that jet was wheels up and out of American airspace, Dr. Elena Volkov would disappear forever into the Syndicate's network. Max pulled ahead, his enhanced conditioning and four-legged advantage giving him superior speed. Sarah had trained him for intercept operations, but never anything like this. In Atlanta, they'd stopped fleeing vehicles, tackled armed suspects, even intercepted a speedboat once. But a $75 million private jet on an active runway? This was unprecedented. "Tower, this is Agent Collins," Sarah transmitted on the emergency frequency. "The aircraft November 7 Charlie Tango X on runway 27 left is involved in an international kidnapping. I am deploying interdiction measures. I need all emergency services standing by." The tower controller's voice was strained. "Agent Collins, we have fire and rescue mobilizing, but you need to understand, if that aircraft is already in its takeoff role, the pilots won't abort unless there's a catastrophic emergency. What exactly are you planning?" Sarah's eyes locked on Max, now 50 yards ahead of her and accelerating toward the runway threshold. The dog was a dark blur against the runway lights, his tactical vest's reflective strips creating brief flashes as he moved. "I'm planning to give them that catastrophic emergency," Sarah replied. The Gulfstream completed its turn and paused momentarily at the runway threshold. Sarah could imagine the pilots inside, receiving their final clearance from tower, advancing the throttles, feeling the aircraft surge forward with 62,000 pounds of thrust, pushing them toward rotation speed. "Max!" Sarah shouted. "Execute Romeo 7. The Belgian Malinois responded instantly. Romeo 7 was a tactical maneuver they'd developed for high-speed vehicle intercepts. Position yourself directly in the target's path, hold position until the last possible moment, force an emergency stop. They'd practiced it dozens of times with cars and trucks during training at MI6's facility in Scotland, never with an aircraft. Max reached the runway and didn't hesitate. He sprinted to the center line, then turned to face the approaching jet. His training took over. Legs spread in a defensive stance, body low, eyes fixed on the threat. The tactical vest's emergency beacon activated automatically, its strobe light flashing brilliant red in the darkness. Sarah watched in horror and pride as the Gulfstream's landing lights illuminated Max like a spotlight. The jet was accelerating now, its wheels spinning faster, the turbines screaming. Standard takeoff procedure for a G650. Rotate at approximately 150 knots, which would happen in about 40 seconds at full throttle. "Control, the intercept is active," Sarah reported, still running. "I need confirmation that Tower has alerted the crew." "Tower is broadcasting emergency warnings on all frequencies," Control replied, the anger in their voice replaced by urgent professionalism. "But 007, if those pilots don't see your dog in time—" "They'll see him," Sarah interrupted. "Trust me." The Gulfstream was 20 seconds from rotation speed, 15 seconds from the point of no return. Sarah's tactical display showed the aircraft's velocity climbing, 80 knots, 90 knots, 100 knots. At this speed, the pilots were committed to either taking off or executing an emergency abort. There was no middle ground. Max held his position. Sarah knew what the dog was experiencing. The overwhelming roar of jet engines, the blinding lights, the wind blast from the prop wash, every instinct screaming at him to run. But Max was trained for this. He trusted Sarah absolutely, and he understood his mission: hold the line. Inside the Gulfstream's cockpit, Captain Victor Petrov saw the flashing red light on the runway centerline at the exact moment his co-pilot called out, "V1!" the speed beyond which an abort would be dangerous. His hand was already moving toward the thrust levers to continue the takeoff when his brain processed what his eyes were seeing: a dog standing directly in their path. "Abort! Abort! Abort!" Petrov screamed, his 20 years of flying experience overridden by pure instinct. His hands flew across the controls, throttles to idle, speed brakes deployed, reverse thrust engaged, full braking pressure applied. The Gulfstream's sophisticated anti-skid system fought to keep the tires from exploding as the aircraft went from 130 knots to 0 in less than 4,000 feet. Inside the cabin, Dr. Elena Volkov was thrown forward against her restraints. The Syndicate operatives cursed and grabbed for handholds as equipment cases slid forward. Sarah watched the drama unfold in what felt like slow motion. The jet's nose dipped as the brakes engaged. Smoke poured from the wheels. The reverse thrust created a visible shockwave in the humid night air, and through it all, Max held his position until the Gulfstream came to a complete stop just 30 meters away from him. Then, and only then, did the Belgian Malinois move. He trotted calmly to the side of the runway and sat down, as if what he'd just done was the most normal thing in the world. Sarah reached him seconds later, dropping to her knees and wrapping her arms around the dog. "Good boy," she whispered fiercely. "Such a good boy." Max's tail wagged, mission accomplished. But Sarah's mission was just beginning. She keyed her comm. "Control, the aircraft is stopped on runway 27 left. I'm moving to intercept and secure the hostage." "Negative, 07, Control responded immediately. "FBI and airport security are en route. Let them handle the extraction." Sarah was already moving toward the immobilized jet. "By the time they get here, the Syndicate will have executed contingency plans. This ends now." She approached the Gulfstream from the rear, using the wing for cover. Through the passenger windows, she could see chaos inside the cabin. The operatives were on their feet, weapons drawn, shouting at each other. One of them was on a satellite phone, probably reporting the situation to his superiors. Another was moving toward Dr. Volkov with clear, hostile intent. Sarah pulled her Walther PPK from its holster. The weapon felt solid and familiar in her hand, the same model that James Bond had carried for decades, now equipped with smart targeting technology that linked to her tactical display. She glanced at Max, who had taken position at the aircraft's nose, watching the cockpit. "Passengers and crew of November 7, Charlie Tango X," Sarah transmitted on the aircraft's radio frequency. "This is MI6 Agent 007. The aircraft is surrounded. Release Dr. Volkov immediately and surrender, or I will board the aircraft and extract her by force." Inside the cabin, one of the operatives laughed and said something in Russian that Sarah's earpiece translated. "One woman thinks she can stop all of us." Sarah smiled grimly. "Max, position Tango 8. The Belgian Malinois moved to the aircraft's emergency exit door, the one on the left side just behind the wing. It was the weakest point of entry, and Sarah had the override codes downloaded from Q Branch. She pulled out a small electronic device and pressed it against the door's control panel. The door's lock clicked open. Everything happened in 3 seconds. Sarah yanked the emergency handle, the door swung outward, and she rolled into the aircraft cabin with her weapon up and Max right behind her. The Syndicate operatives turned in surprise, but Sarah had trained for close-quarters combat in confined spaces. This was her element. "Gun!" one operative shouted, swinging his submachine gun toward her. Sarah fired twice. The smart targeting system ensured both rounds hit the weapon itself, sending it spinning from the operative's hands. He stumbled backward, clutching his bruised fingers. Max launched himself at a second operative who was reaching for his sidearm, taking the man down with 70 pounds of muscle and fury. The other operatives froze, suddenly realizing they were in a metal tube with a highly trained MI6 agent and an attack dog. The tactical advantage they'd had on the ground meant nothing here. "Weapons down," Sarah ordered, her Walther tracking between targets. "Hands where I can see them, now." 3 submachine guns clattered to the floor. Sarah kicked them toward the rear of the aircraft, never taking her eyes off the operatives. Max maintained his position on top of the downed operative, teeth bared in a clear warning. "Dr. Volkov," Sarah called out, "are you injured?" The scientist, still zip-tied to her seat, shook her head. Her eyes were wide with shock, but Sarah saw intelligence and determination there. This was a woman who'd survived 3 days as a hostage. She wasn't about to fall apart now. Sarah moved toward her, keeping the operatives in her peripheral vision. She pulled out a tactical knife and cut the zip ties. "I'm Agent Collins, MI6. You're safe now." "Thank you," Dr. Volkov whispered in accented English. "But you don't understand. They have—" "Hands on your head!" a voice shouted from the cockpit. Sarah spun to see the co-pilot emerging with a pistol. "I said—" Max was faster. The dog released the operative he'd been guarding and crossed the cabin in 2 bounds, hitting the co-pilot's center mass. The pistol discharged harmlessly into the ceiling as the man went down. Sarah secured the weapon and quickly zip-tied the co-pilot's hands. "Anyone else want to try something stupid?" she asked the cabin at large. Silence. The operatives glared at her with professional hatred, but they were professionals enough to recognize when they'd lost. Sarah heard sirens in the distance. FBI, airport security, probably half the law enforcement in Atlanta converging on the runway. She helped Dr. Volkov to her feet, noting the bruises on the woman's wrists and the exhaustion in her eyes. "Come on," Sarah said gently, "let's get you out of here." As they moved toward the emergency exit, Dr. Volkov grabbed Sarah's arm. "Agent Collins, there's something you need to know. They didn't just kidnap me for my expertise. They showed me something, a device. They're planning to release a bioweapon at—" An explosion of static filled Sarah's earpiece. Then a new voice, cold and precise, speaking English with a faint Eastern European accent. "Agent 007. How impressive. But did you really think we wouldn't have contingencies?" Sarah's blood ran cold. "Who is this?" "Someone who doesn't appreciate interference." You have 30 seconds to evacuate the aircraft. Then the bomb detonates. Sarah's eyes snapped to the cargo area. Through the open cockpit door, she could see a red LED display counting down 029, 028, 027. Control! Sarah shouted into her comm. We have an IED on board. I need bomb disposal. No time, Control interrupted. Get out now. Sarah grabbed Dr. Volkov's hand. Max, exit now! The Belgian Malinois bolted through the emergency door. Sarah practically threw Dr. Volkov out after him, then jumped herself, hitting the tarmac hard and rolling. She grabbed the scientist and ran, Max racing ahead of them. 20 seconds, 15 seconds, 10. Sarah's lungs screamed as she pushed herself beyond exhaustion, dragging Dr. Volkov along. The FBI vehicles were pulling up to the runway, agents emerging with weapons drawn. Max reached them first, barking urgently. 5 seconds. Sarah dove behind an FBI vehicle, pulling Dr. Volkov down with her. She covered the scientist's body with her own and braced for impact. The Gulfstream G650 exploded in a massive fireball that lit up the night sky like a second sun. The shockwave rolled across the runway, shattering windows in nearby terminals. Burning debris rained down across half an acre. Sarah raised her head slowly. The $75 million aircraft was now a twisted, burning wreck. The Syndicate operatives who'd been inside were gone. The evidence they might have provided was destroyed. But Dr. Eleanor Volkov was alive, and that was what mattered. Sarah looked at Max, who sat calmly beside her despite the chaos. The dog met her gaze with complete trust and satisfaction. They'd done it, against impossible odds, against direct orders, against common sense. They'd saved a life. Sarah keyed her comm. Control, this is 007. The hostage is secure. The suspects are neutralized, requesting immediate medical attention for Dr. Volkov. There was a long pause. Then, acknowledged, 007. Well done. M wants to speak with you immediately. Sarah smiled wearily. I bet he does. She looked at the burning wreckage, then at the frightened but alive scientist beside her, then at Max, who'd just stopped a jet with nothing but courage and training. Being 007 wasn't about following orders. It was about doing what was right, even when everyone told you it was wrong. James Bond would have approved. The emergency medical team arrived within minutes, their ambulance lights painting the smoke-filled runway in alternating red and white. Sarah stayed close to Dr. Volkov as the paramedics checked her vitals, administering oxygen and wrapping her in a thermal blanket despite the humid Atlanta night. Max sat at Sarah's side, his tactical vest still strobing with emergency lights, his dark eyes tracking every movement around them. Blood pressures elevated but stable, one paramedic reported. Moderate dehydration, some bruising consistent with restraints. Ma'am, we need to transport you to Grady Memorial for a full examination. Dr. Volkov shook her head weakly. No, not yet. Agent Collins, I need to tell you what I know. Before they... Doctor, you've been through a traumatic experience. Sarah interrupted gently. You need medical attention first. We can debrief once you're... There's no time. Dr. Volkov grabbed Sarah's wrist with surprising strength. Her accent thickened with urgency. The Syndicate didn't kidnap me for a future project. They already have a weapon. They showed me the specifications, forced me to verify the delivery system. Agent Collins, they're planning to deploy it within 72 hours. Sarah felt ice flood her veins. She keyed her comm. Control, Priority Alpha. Dr. Volkov has intelligence on an imminent Syndicate bioweapon attack. I need a secure medical facility and a full debrief team immediately. Copy that, 007. CDC has a secure facility at Emory University Hospital. We're coordinating now. FBI is requesting access to the interview. Denied, Sarah said flatly. This is MI6 jurisdiction. The Syndicate is an international terrorist organization, and Dr. Volkov is a British citizen. She could hear arguments erupting on the other end of the channel, but Sarah switched frequencies. Politics could wait, lives couldn't. Behind them, firefighters were dousing the remains of the Gulfstream with foam. The fuselage was a blackened skeleton, still radiating heat. FBI agents in tactical gear were establishing a perimeter, their faces grim as they documented what was left of the Syndicate operatives inside. Special Agent Marcus Chen, FBI Atlanta Field Office, approached with his credentials out. He was mid-40s, fit, with the careful eyes of someone who'd seen too many crime scenes. "Agent Collins, I need you to surrender your weapon and submit to questioning. You discharged a firearm on federal property without authorization, and 6 people are dead." Sarah met his gaze calmly. Those 6 people were international terrorists transporting a kidnapped scientist. I acted within my authority as an MI6 agent, operating under mutual assistance protocols. My weapon and tactical report will be available through proper channels. "That's not how this works," Chen said, his hand moving toward his sidearm. "I have orders to," Max growled. It was a low, rumbling sound that made every FBI agent within earshot tense. The Belgian Malinois stood and positioned himself between Sarah and Chen, his body language unmistakable. Threat detected, prepared to defend. "Stand down, Max," Sarah commanded. The dog immediately sat, but his eyes never left Chen. "Your dog just threatened a federal agent," Chen said. "My partner detected your aggressive posture and responded appropriately," Sarah corrected. "Agent Chen, I understand you're doing your job, but right now I have a witness to an imminent terrorist attack. Every second we waste on jurisdictional disputes is a second the Syndicate uses to finalize their plans. So here's what's going to happen. Dr. Volkov gets medical attention at a secure facility. I conduct my debrief, and then I will happily sit through as many FBI interviews as you want. But the debrief happens first." Chen looked like he wanted to argue, but a voice crackled over his radio. "Chen, this is SAC Morrison. Stand down. The director just got a call from Washington. MI6 has operational authority on this one. Cooperate fully." Chen's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. "Fine, but I'm assigning 2 agents to accompany Dr. Volkov. Non-negotiable." "Acceptable," Sarah agreed. "Have them meet us at Emory." As the paramedics loaded Dr. Volkov into the ambulance, Sarah's earpiece activated with a new voice, crisp, British, and carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Agent 007, quite the show you put on tonight." Sarah winced. "Sir, I can explain." "Oh, I'm certain you can, and you will. But first, tell me about this bioweapon." Sarah walked away from the FBI agents, Max following at her heel. She kept her voice low. "Dr. Volkov says the Syndicate has a deployable weapon. Timeline 72 hours. She verified specifications under duress. I'm moving her to CDC's secure facility for a full debrief. The woman's been captive for 3 days. She could be compromised, feeding us disinformation." "Possible," Sarah admitted. "But she was terrified, Em. Whatever she saw, she believes it's real, and the Syndicate was willing to blow up a $75 million aircraft rather than let us take their operatives alive. That suggests they're protecting something significant." There was a pause. Sarah could imagine M in his office at Thames House, weighing options with the cold calculus that had kept Britain safe for 3 decades. "Very well," M said finally. "Conduct your debrief. Q Branch is sending a team to collect the wreckage. Perhaps we can salvage some intelligence from the debris. And 007, about your creative approach to aircraft interdiction, we'll discuss that later. At length." "Yes, sir." The connection ended. Sarah looked down at Max, who was watching her with patient intelligence. "Well, boy, sounds like we're in trouble. Again." Max's tail wagged slightly. He'd heard that tone before. Sarah rode in the ambulance with Dr. Volkov. Max stretched out on the floor between them. The scientist kept her hand on the dog's head, drawing visible comfort from his presence. It was something Sarah had seen countless times, the calming effect that Max had on traumatized people. It was one reason she'd fought so hard to keep him as her partner when she became 007. "How long have you worked together?" Dr. Volkov asked quietly. 7 years with Atlanta PD, another 18 months with MI6, Sarah replied. "He's the best partner I've ever had. I had a dog growing up, in Moscow, before my family emigrated. A mutt named Boris. Dr. Volkov smiled at the memory. He was nothing like Max, of course, but he was loyal. Dogs understand loyalty better than most people. The Syndicate, Sarah prompted gently. How did they take you? Dr. Volkov's smile faded. Geneva. I was attending a conference on emerging viral threats. They grabbed me in the hotel parking garage. 3 men, very professional, drugged me immediately. When I woke up, I was in a warehouse somewhere. They never told me where. What did they want? Verification. They had blueprints for a dispersal system, aerosol-based, designed to spread through air conditioning systems in large buildings. Very sophisticated military-grade engineering, but they needed someone with viral weaponization expertise to confirm it would work. Sarah's stomach tightened. What's the payload? Modified hemorrhagic fever virus, similar to Ebola but with a longer incubation period, 5 to 7 days instead of 2 to 21. Highly contagious during the asymptomatic phase. By the time people start showing symptoms, hundreds could already be infected. Jesus, Sarah breathed. Fatality rate? 80 to 90% without immediate treatment, and the treatment requires specialized antivirals that most hospitals don't stock in quantity. Dr. Volkov's voice was steady, but her hands trembled. Agent Collins, I spent 40 years studying these pathogens. I've seen what they do to human bodies. If the Syndicate deploys this weapon in a major population center— She didn't finish. She didn't need to. The ambulance pulled up to Emory University Hospital's secure entrance. Sarah saw MI6 agents already in position, along with Chen's 2 FBI representatives. Q Branch had worked fast. They moved Dr. Volkov to a secure conference room in the CDC's Biodefense Wing. Sarah had been here once before, during a joint training exercise on bioterrorism response. The room was designed to be electronically isolated, no signals in or out except through encrypted MI6 channels. Sarah set up her tactical tablet while medical staff took Dr. Volkov's blood samples. Max settled in a corner, ever watchful. The debrief took 3 hours. Dr. Volkov described everything she'd seen in meticulous detail. The warehouse location based on ambient sounds and flight times, the faces of her captors, the technical specifications of the dispersal system, the viral payload's characteristics. Q-branch analysts joined via secure video, peppering Dr. Volkov with technical questions. Sarah watched the scientist's answers, looking for inconsistencies or signs of duress. She found none. Whatever else Dr. Volkov might be, she was genuinely terrified of what the Syndicate planned to do. Target location, Sarah finally asked. Did they mention where they planned to deploy? Dr. Volkov hesitated. They were careful not to say directly. But I heard them mention the summit, and one of them joked about killing all the world's problems in one room. Sarah's blood ran cold. The G20 Summit. It starts in 3 days. In New York. Christ, one of the Q-branch analysts muttered over the video link. Every major world leader in one location. If they deploy a weaponized hemorrhagic fever virus there— We're not going to let that happen, Sarah interrupted. She looked at Dr. Volkov. You said you heard ambient sounds at the warehouse, aircraft. What kind? Heavy cargo planes, military transports, I think, very loud, flying low, every few hours. Sarah pulled up a map on her tablet. There are only 3 places near Atlanta with that kind of military cargo traffic: Dobbins Air Reserve Base, Robbins Air Force Base, and the old Naval Air Station Atlanta that's now a cargo hub. The naval station, Dr. Volkov said suddenly. I heard ships too, foghorns. We must have been near water. Sarah's fingers flew across the tablet. The old Naval Air Station was adjacent to the Chattahoochee River. Lots of decommissioned buildings, minimal security since the military pullout. Perfect for a Syndicate operation. Control, I have a probable location for the Syndicate's Atlanta cell, Sarah transmitted. Old Naval Air Station, Southwest Sector. I'm moving to investigate. Negative, 007, M's voice replied. You've been operational for 16 straight hours. Stand down and let FBI handle the raid. Sarah glanced at the 2 FBI agents in the corner. They were good men, professional, but they didn't understand the Syndicate the way she did. They didn't know how these terrorists operated, how quickly they could evacuate a position, how ruthlessly they protected their operations. Sir, with respect, that's an order, Agent Collins. You've done enough cowboy operations for one night. Go to the safe house, get some rest and prepare for deployment to New York. We need you sharp for the G20 security operation. Sarah wanted to argue. Every instinct told her to move now, to hit the Syndicate before they could relocate. But Em was right. She was exhausted, running on adrenaline and caffeine. Max was tired too. She could see it in the way he was lying down instead of sitting alert. Understood, sir, but I want immediate notification if the FBI raid finds anything. Agreed. Now stand down, that's final. The connection ended. Sarah looked at Dr. Volkov, who was being escorted to a secure room for rest. The scientist gave her a weary nod of gratitude. Thank you, Agent Collins, for everything. Thank Max, Sarah replied. He's the one who stopped the jet. Dr. Volkov smiled and reached down to scratch Max behind the ears. Thank you, Max. You're a very good boy. Max's tail thumped against the floor. Sarah collected her gear and headed for the exit, Max at her side. Outside, dawn was breaking over Atlanta, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The city was waking up, oblivious to how close it had come to losing one of the world's top bioweapons experts to terrorists. An MI6 driver was waiting with a black SUV. Sarah climbed in back, Max jumping up beside her. As they drove toward the safe house in Buckhead, Sarah's mind was already working through scenarios. The G20 Summit. 3 days, hundreds of potential infiltration points, and somewhere out there, the Syndicate was preparing to deploy a weapon that could kill thousands. Her phone buzzed with an encrypted message from M. FBI raid on Naval Air Station in 1 hour. You're officially stood down, but unofficially keeping your tactical comm active would not be against regulations. Get some rest. 07. You'll need it. Sarah smiled. Em understood her better than he let on. She looked at Max, who was already dozing with his head on her lap. 3 days, boy. 3 days to stop a bioweapon attack on the world's most protected summit. Max opened one eye, then closed it again. They'd faced worse odds before. Sarah leaned back against the seat and closed her eyes. The game was on, and Agent 007 was ready to play. Sarah jolted awake to the sound of her tactical comm crackling to life. She'd been asleep for maybe 2 hours, sprawled on the couch in the Buckhead safe house, with Max curled up on the floor beside her. The Belgian Malinois lifted his head immediately, ears forward, reading her body language. 007, this is Control. The FBI raid on the Naval Air Station just went sideways. Heavy resistance. They're requesting immediate MI6 support. Sarah was on her feet before the transmission ended, already pulling on her tactical vest. Status report. How many agents down? 3 wounded, none critical. But they've got the Syndicate cornered in Hangar 12. The terrorists are threatening to destroy evidence and detonate explosives. FBI is requesting you specifically. They want someone who knows how these people operate. I'm 10 minutes out. Tell them to establish a perimeter and wait for my arrival. No heroics. Sarah grabbed her Walther PPK and checked the magazine. Full load. Smart targeting system active. What about the bioweapon? Unknown. Thermal imaging shows at least 8 hostiles in the hangar, along with what appears to be laboratory equipment. Q branch is analyzing the scans now. Sarah looked at Max. Ready to work, boy? The dog was already at the door, tail wagging with controlled excitement. Some dogs were trained for detection, some for protection. Max was trained for both, and for direct action against armed threats. The MI6 driver pushed the SUV hard through early morning Atlanta traffic, lights and sirens clearing a path. Sarah used the time to review the tactical situation on her tablet. FBI had moved on the Naval Air Station at 0600, expecting minimal resistance based on Sarah's intelligence. Instead, they'd walked into a fully prepared defensive position. The Syndicate had been waiting for them. Control, this smells like a trap, Sarah transmitted. How did they know FBI was coming? Working theory is they have someone inside local law enforcement monitoring police frequencies. They heard the mobilization chatter. Sarah frowned. That made sense, but something still felt off. The Syndicate was ruthless and professional. If they knew a raid was coming, why not evacuate? Why make a stand? Unless they were protecting something they couldn't move quickly, like a bioweapons laboratory. The SUV screeched to a halt at the FBI perimeter, 200 yards from Hangar 12. Special Agent Chen was coordinating from a mobile command post, his face tight with frustration. He looked up as Sarah approached with Max. "Agent Collins, glad you could make it." There was no sarcasm in his voice now, just the tone of a professional who recognized when he needed specialist help. "We've got a Mexican standoff, 8 confirmed hostiles, all armed with military-grade weapons. They're claiming to have explosives wired throughout the hangar. We move in, they blow everything. What about negotiations? They're not interested. They demanded free passage to the airport and a fueled aircraft. We told them that wasn't happening. They responded by shooting at our perimeter. No casualties, but it's clear they're not bluffing about defending their position." Sarah studied the hangar through tactical binoculars. It was an old military structure, corrugated metal walls and roof, 2 massive bay doors facing the tarmac. Every window had been covered from the inside. Smart, it eliminated sniper options and forced any assault to come through fatal funnels at the doors. "What's the floor plan?" Sarah asked. Chen pulled up blueprints on his tablet. Single large space, approximately 10,000 square feet. Some internal offices along the east wall, but mostly open floor. "The equipment we're seeing on thermal is concentrated in the southeast corner." "That's where the lab is," Sarah said. "Max, come." She led the dog to the edge of the perimeter, staying behind cover. Max's enhanced sensors in his tactical vest included chemical detection capabilities, Q Branch's latest upgrade. If there were biological agents in that hangar, Max would smell them. The Belgian Malinois spent 30 seconds sampling the air, his nose working with focused intensity. Then he sat and pawed his left ear, the signal for biological hazard detected. "Control, Max is confirming biological materials on site," Sarah reported. "We have to assume the bioweapon is in that hangar, which means we can't just wait them out or use explosives. We need surgical extraction." "Acknowledged. What's your plan?" Sarah studied the hangar again, her mind working through tactical options. The Syndicate expected a frontal assault. That's what they'd prepared for, which meant she needed to do something they wouldn't expect. Her eyes fell on the hangar's roof. Old corrugated metal, probably rusted in places, not designed to support much weight, but Max only weighed 70 pounds, and she was 135. "I'm going in through the roof," Sarah announced. Chen looked at her like she was insane. "Agent Collins, that roof could collapse. Even if it doesn't, you'll be completely exposed when you breach. They'll hear you coming. Not if you give them something else to listen to." Sarah pointed at the FBI's armored tactical vehicle. "I need you to create a diversion. Move that vehicle toward the main doors. Make a lot of noise. Threaten to breach. While they're focused on that, Max and I will come in from above." "That's suicide," Chen said flatly. "It's tactical surprise," Sarah corrected. "The Syndicate trains their operatives for conventional threats. They won't expect a K9 unit dropping through the ceiling." Chen looked at his team, then back at Sarah. "If this goes wrong, then you can tell MI died doing something appropriately dramatic for a 007 agent, but it won't go wrong." Sarah keyed her comm. "Control, I need Q Branch online. I'm going to need precise thermal imaging guidance for the roof breach." "Q Branch here," came the familiar voice of the quartermaster. "I'm looking at the building specs now. The southeast corner has the weakest roof structure. That's above their laboratory area. But 007, I must advise that dropping into a room full of biological weapons is extraordinarily reckless." "Noted. What am I looking at for opposition?" "Thermal shows 3 hostiles in the lab area, 5 more spread throughout the main hangar space. I'm sending the layout to your tactical display now." Sarah's wrist screen lit up with a 3D thermal map. She studied the positions carefully. The 3 hostiles in the lab were clustered around what looked like containment equipment. The other 5 were positioned near the doors, defensive positions with overlapping fields of fire. "Max," Sarah said quietly, "this is going to be loud and dangerous. You with me?" The Belgian Malinois looked at her with absolute trust. Where Sarah went, Max followed. That was the deal. That was the partnership. Sarah collected her gear: climbing rope, breach charges, flashbangs, and her Walther. She added a specialized rebreather mask. If the bioweapon was aerosolized, she'd need protection. Max had his own mask integrated into his tactical vest, activated by remote command. "Chen, give me 10 minutes to get in position, then start your diversion." Sarah moved around the perimeter with Max, staying low and using abandoned vehicles for cover. The Syndicate had lookouts, but they were focused on the FBI's obvious positions. They didn't notice one woman and a dog circling to the rear of the building. She reached the hangar's back corner and pulled out her climbing gear. The metal wall had enough imperfections to serve as handholds, but it was going to be a slow, quiet climb. She attached a harness to Max. He'd done vertical extractions before in training, but never up the side of a building. "Ready?" she whispered. Max's tail moved once. "Ready." Sarah started climbing. The metal was rusty and sharp, cutting her gloves and making tiny scraping sounds that seemed impossibly loud. Max followed in his harness, trusting Sarah to pull him up in stages. It took 8 minutes of agonizing slow movement to reach the roof. The corrugated metal groaned under their combined weight. Sarah froze, listening for alarm from inside. Nothing. She crawled forward carefully, testing each section before committing her weight. The thermal map on her wrist showed the hostiles below, still in their positions. She reached the weak point above the laboratory and pulled out a small laser cutter, another Q-branch toy. She began cutting a circular entry hole, the laser making a barely audible hiss as it sliced through rust and metal. Her comm crackled. 07, this is Chen. We're beginning the diversion. Good luck. Below, she heard the FBI's armored vehicle roar to life, its diesel engine bellowing as it accelerated toward the hangar's main doors. Spotlights blazed. A loudspeaker boomed, "This is the FBI. You have 30 seconds to surrender before we breach." Inside the hangar, the Syndicate operatives shouted orders in Russian and Arabic. Thermal imaging showed them moving toward the front doors, weapons raised, exactly as Sarah had predicted. She finished cutting the circle and carefully removed the metal section. Below was a 12-foot drop into the laboratory area. She could see stainless steel equipment, containment vessels, and 3 men in tactical gear with their backs to her, focused on the commotion at the doors. Sarah looked at Max. Silent entry. Subdue only. No barking. The dog understood. He'd trained for silent takedowns, using his mass and speed to knock targets down without alerting others nearby. Sarah clipped her rope to the roof structure and rappelled down through the hole, Max descending in his harness beside her. They dropped into the laboratory with barely a sound, landing in a crouch behind a large containment unit. One of the operatives turned, sensing something wrong. His eyes widened as he saw Sarah, his mouth opened to shout a warning. Max hit him like a furry missile, 70 pounds of muscle and momentum taking the man down before he could make a sound. Sarah was already moving, covering the distance to the second operative in 3 silent steps. She struck him in the throat with a precise nerve strike, one of the first lessons James Bond had taught her, and he collapsed, gasping soundlessly. The third operative spun around, bringing up his weapon, too slow. Sarah grabbed his rifle barrel, redirecting it upward as he fired. The suppressed shots stitched across the ceiling, barely audible over the chaos at the front doors. Sarah followed with a headbutt that shattered the man's nose, then a knee to the groin that dropped him. 3 hostiles down in less than 10 seconds. Sarah zip-tied their hands while Max stood guard, his teeth bared in warning. None of them would be getting up soon. Sarah surveyed the laboratory equipment. It was sophisticated, level 4 biosafety protocols, sealed containment systems, aerosol dispersal canisters marked with biohazard symbols. Q branch was right. This was a fully operational bioweapons lab, and there, in a refrigerated containment unit, were 6 cylindrical containers marked with Cyrillic lettering. Sarah's Russian was functional enough to read the labels: modified hemorrhagic fever variant, weapons grade. "Control, I have eyes on the bioweapon," Sarah whispered into her comm. 6 containers. Appears to be the viral payload Dr. Volkov described. "I'm securing the lab now." -007, M's voice cut in. "You need to evacuate immediately. We've intercepted Syndicate communications. They're about to detonate the explosives." Sarah's blood ran cold. "How long?" "Minutes, maybe less. Get out now." But Sarah was staring at the viral containers. If those detonated, the explosion would aerosolize the virus. Everyone within a quarter-mile radius would be exposed. The entire FBI tactical team, local residents, maybe thousands of people. "I can't leave the bioweapon," Sarah said. "If it detonates, then you die with everyone else. Evacuate!" Sarah looked at the containment unit. It was designed to be portable, part of the dispersal system the Syndicate had built, but it weighed at least 200 pounds, too heavy for her to carry alone, too heavy to get through the roof hole, which meant going out through the front, past 5 armed Syndicate operatives, while carrying an unstable bioweapon in a building rigged to explode. Sarah smiled grimly. James Bond had faced worse odds. Probably. "Max," she said, "we're taking the front door. Combat mode. Neutralize any threat." The Belgian Malinois' demeanor changed instantly. His ears went back, his body lowered, every muscle tensed for explosive action. This was the part of the job Max loved, protecting Sarah, taking down bad guys, being the hero. Sarah grabbed the containment unit and heaved it onto a wheeled laboratory cart. It rolled surprisingly smoothly. The Syndicate had designed it for mobile deployment. She pulled out 2 flashbangs and a smoke grenade. Not much of an arsenal, but it would have to do. She keyed her comm. "Chen, I'm coming out the front with the bioweapon. I need you to clear a path and prepare a hazmat containment team. Tell your people to take cover. This is about to get loud." "Collins, what are you—" Sarah kicked open the laboratory door and rolled the smoke grenade into the main hangar space. As thick grey smoke began to fill the area, she pulled the pins on both flashbangs and threw them in opposite directions. The explosions were deafening. The Syndicate operatives, already on edge from the FBI's diversion, panicked in the sudden chaos. Sarah pushed the cart forward at a dead run, Max racing ahead of her through the smoke. A figure emerged from the haze, weapon raised. Max hit him low, taking out his legs. The man went down hard. Another operative fired blindly through the smoke. Sarah felt a round tug at her jacket sleeve, but ignored it. She was committed now. Forward was the only option. She shoved the cart toward the main doors with all her strength. 2 more operatives appeared, their weapons tracking toward her. Sarah drew her Walther and fired twice, both rounds hitting weapons, not flesh. The smart targeting system was worth every pound it added to the pistol's weight. The operatives dove for cover. Sarah reached the main doors and slammed into them with the cart. The corroded locks broke and the doors flew open, brilliant morning sunlight flooding the smoke-filled hangar. FBI agents were everywhere, weapons raised. "Hazmat emergency!" Sarah shouted. "Bioweapon payload, clear the area!" She kept pushing the cart, getting distance from the hangar. Max ran beside her, looking back to ensure no threats were following. 50 yards, 75, 100. Behind them, the hangar exploded. The shockwave hit Sarah from behind, lifting her and the cart and throwing them forward. She tucked and rolled, protecting her head, feeling the heat and debris wash over her. Max yelped as something struck him, but he kept running. Sarah slid to a stop 20 yards later, ears ringing, body aching. She looked back at the hangar, or what was left of it. The entire structure had collapsed into a burning pile of twisted metal and rubble. The 5 Syndicate operatives who'd been inside were gone, but the containment unit on the cart beside her was intact. The viral payload was secure. Sarah lay on the concrete, gasping for breath. Max limped over and licked her face anxiously. She wrapped her arms around him. "Good boy," she whispered. "Such a good boy." FBI hazmat teams surrounded them within seconds, but Sarah barely noticed. She'd done it. Against impossible odds, against direct orders, against common sense. She'd secured a bioweapon that could have killed thousands. Special Agent Chen appeared, looking down at her with something between respect and disbelief. "Agent Collins, you're either the bravest person I've ever met or the craziest." Sarah managed a tired smile. "Can't I be both?" M's voice crackled in her earpiece. "Agent 07, once again you've exceeded expectations while completely disregarding protocol. We'll discuss your performance review later. For now, well done." Sarah closed her eyes. 2 missions in 12 hours, 2 near-death experiences, and somewhere out there, the Syndicate was still planning to attack the G20 Summit in 3 days. But right now, lying on the tarmac with Max beside her and the morning sun warm on her face, Sarah Collins allowed herself one moment of satisfaction. Being 007 was exhausting, but it was never boring. The CDC's mobile containment unit arrived 30 minutes after the explosion, a massive white vehicle that looked like something from a science fiction film. Dr. Elena Volkov emerged from an escort vehicle behind it, her face pale but determined. She'd insisted on coming to the scene personally to verify the bioweapon's status. Sarah watched from a decontamination tent as specialists in full hazmat suits carefully transferred the viral containers from the laboratory cart into a sealed transport case. Max sat beside her, his left flank wrapped in bandages where debris from the explosion had grazed him. The veterinary team had pronounced him fit for duty, but Sarah could see the exhaustion in his eyes. He'd earned rest, and she intended to make sure he got it. "Agent Collins," Dr. Volkov said, entering the tent with her own escort. "I heard what you did, coming through the roof, securing the payload, escaping the explosion. You saved thousands of lives." "Max did most of the heavy lifting," Sarah replied, scratching the Belgian Malinois behind the ears. "I just tried not to get us killed." Dr. Volkov knelt beside Max, examining him with a scientist's careful eye. "Remarkable animal." The modifications MI6 made to his tactical equipment, the sensor arrays, the communications integration, it's brilliant work. But underneath all that technology, he's still just a loyal dog who trusts his partner completely. "That's what makes him dangerous," Sarah said softly. "He'll follow me into anything because he believes I'll keep him safe. Sometimes I wonder if I'm worthy of that trust." "You jumped onto an active runway to stop a private jet," Dr. Volkov pointed out. "You breached a terrorist laboratory through the roof. You carried a bioweapon through an explosion. I think you've earned his trust, Agent Collins." Sarah's calm crackled. 07, this is Control. M wants you back at Emory for a full briefing. The intelligence we've recovered from the hangar is significant. We may have a lead on the G20 attack. "Understood. En route in 10 minutes. Sarah stood, her body protesting every movement. She'd been operating on adrenaline for too long, and the crash was coming. But there was no time for weakness, not with 2 days left before the summit. The drive back to Emory was quiet. Sarah dozed in the SUV while Max slept with his head on her lap. She dreamed of explosions and viral containers, of jets on runways, and voices in encrypted transmissions, warning of attacks that could kill thousands. She woke as they pulled up to the hospital's secure entrance. M was waiting in the briefing room, along with Q and several analysts from both MI6 and the CIA. The American intelligence community had finally accepted that this was bigger than jurisdictional disputes. "Agent 007, M greeted her. "You look terrible." "Thank you, sir. I feel worse." "Good. That means you're still human." M gestured to the display screens showing data recovered from the destroyed hangar. "We pulled several laptops and hard drives from the rubble before it cooled. Q Branch has been working around the clock to decrypt them. What we've found is both encouraging and deeply concerning." Q took over, his fingers flying across a tablet. Images appeared on the screens, schematics, personnel files, financial transactions. "The good news is we've confirmed the viral payload you recovered was the only weaponized sample. The Syndicate's laboratory in Atlanta was their primary production facility." You destroyed it, along with all their research data and manufacturing capability. And the bad news? Sarah asked. The bad news is they already deployed an advance team to New York. 6 operatives, all with legitimate credentials to access the G20 Summit venue. They left Atlanta 2 days ago, before we knew about the operation. They're in position now, waiting for the payload that you recovered. Sarah felt ice in her stomach. So we stopped the weapon, but not the people who were supposed to use it. Precisely, and here's where it gets complicated. M pulled up a series of photographs. These are the 6 operatives. 4 are known Syndicate members with extensive terrorist backgrounds, but 2 are surprises. This man is Captain Viktor Petrov, the pilot from the Gulfstream jet. Sarah stared at the photo, the same pilot who'd aborted takeoff when Max jumped onto the runway. He survived the explosion. He was in the cockpit, which shielded him from the worst of the blast. He's in FBI custody with extensive burns and injuries. But before he was sedated for surgery, he said something interesting. "Tell Agent Collins I never wanted to hurt anyone. They have my daughter." The room went silent. Sarah processed this information, her mind racing. The Syndicate coerced him. They kidnapped his daughter to force his cooperation. It appears so. We're working with Russian authorities to locate her now, but here's what matters for our purposes. Petrov knew details about the G20 operation. He was supposed to fly the backup extraction after the attack, and he's willing to talk. Q pulled up more data. According to Petrov's preliminary debriefing, the Syndicate's plan was elegantly simple. They secured 6 credentials for Summit support staff: catering, technical services, security. Each operative would carry a small aerosol dispersal device disguised as common equipment. During the opening ceremony, when all the world leaders are in the main hall, they activate the devices simultaneously. The modified virus spreads through the ventilation system. Within hours, everyone in the building is infected. "Jesus," one of the CIA analysts muttered. "It would be the single deadliest terrorist attack in history." "Indeed," M said. "Which is why we need to identify and neutralize all 6 operatives before the summit begins tomorrow morning. Sarah, you're going to New York tonight." Sarah straightened, despite her exhaustion. "What's the operational plan?" "The Secret Service and FBI are conducting enhanced security screenings of all summit staff, but they don't know what they're looking for. You do. You've spent 18 months tracking the Syndicate, studying their methods, understanding their operational patterns. Q Branch will provide you with portable bioweapon detection equipment. You and Max will screen every staff member with Summit access. Anyone who shows suspicious behavior or has contact with biological agents, you flag for detention." "That's over 3,000 people, sir. Even working around the clock, there's no way to screen them all before the summit starts." "Then you prioritize. Focus on the areas with direct access to the main hall's ventilation systems, catering facilities, technical rooms, security stations. The Syndicate operatives will need to be in positions where they can deploy their devices effectively. That narrows your search." Sarah looked at Max, who had perked up at the sound of her voice. The dog was exhausted, injured, and had already performed 2 near-impossible missions in the past 24 hours. What she was about to ask him to do was unfair, but the alternative was unthinkable. "Max," she said quietly, "one more mission. Can you do it?" The Belgian Malinois stood, ignoring his bandaged flank. His tail wagged once. Where Sarah went, Max followed, no matter the cost. Sarah turned back to M. "We'll need a direct flight to New York and immediate access to the summit venue. No delays, no security checks that waste time. Every minute counts." "Already arranged. There's an Mi-6 jet fueled and waiting at Dobbins Air Reserve Base. You wheels up in 1 hour?" M's expression softened slightly. "Sarah, I know you're running on empty. I know I'm asking the impossible. But you're the only agent I trust with this mission. You've proven you can think like the Syndicate. Anticipate their moves. If anyone can find these operatives before they strike, it's you." Sarah nodded. "We won't let you down, sir. I know you won't. That's why you're 007. The flight to New York took less than 2 hours. Sarah used the time to study the files Q Branch had compiled on every Summit staff member with relevant access. Max slept in the cabin, his body finally getting the rest it desperately needed. Sarah envied him. Her own mind wouldn't stop racing, running through scenarios and contingencies. They landed at Teterboro Airport and were immediately transported to the Javits Center, where the G20 Summit would take place. The venue was a fortress. Secret Service agents were everywhere, along with NYPD counterterrorism units, FBI tactical teams, and security personnel from every G20 nation. Sarah had never seen such a concentration of law enforcement in one place. She was escorted to a secure operations center where she met Special Agent Jennifer Park, Secret Service lead for the summit. Park was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense. She listened to Sarah's briefing without interruption, then pulled up a facility map on a large display screen. "We have 147 staff members with direct access to ventilation systems," Park said. "Another 223 with access to areas where aerosol devices could be deployed effectively. How do you want to approach this?" Sarah studied the map. "Max's detection capabilities are most effective at close range, within 10 feet. We need to position ourselves in high-traffic areas where staff members will pass by naturally, checkpoints without making it obvious we're screening them. We can set up mandatory credential verification stations. Every staff member has to check in before accessing their assigned areas. We route them past your position." "Perfect. Let's start with catering and technical services. Those are the most likely insertion points for the Syndicate operatives." They worked through the night. Staff member after staff member passed by Sarah's position, while Max sat calmly beside her, his enhanced sensors analyzing every person. Most showed nothing. A few triggered false positives. People who'd recently worked with cleaning chemicals or had medical conditions that produced unusual biological markers, but no Syndicate operatives, not yet. As dawn broke over New York and the summit's opening ceremony approached, Sarah felt desperation creeping in. They'd screened over 200 people. Where were the terrorists? Then Max suddenly stood, his attention locked on a man in a catering uniform pushing a service cart. The dog's nose worked intensively, and then he pawed his left ear. Biological hazard detected. Sarah keyed her comm. "Park, I have a positive hit. Catering worker, designation Charlie 74, pushing a cart toward the main hall service entrance. Intercept now." Secret Service agents moved immediately, surrounding the man before he could react. They found the aerosol device hidden in a coffee urn, exactly as Q Branch had predicted. 1 down, 5 to go. Over the next 4 hours, Max detected 3 more operatives. A technical services worker carrying detection equipment, a security officer with a suspicious backpack, and a cleaning crew member whose vacuum cleaner contained a dispersal device instead of a motor. 4 down, 2 still missing. The opening ceremony was scheduled to begin in 30 minutes. World leaders were arriving, taking their positions in the main hall. Security was at maximum alert, but somewhere in the massive facility, 2 Syndicate operatives were still hidden, waiting for their moment. Sarah stood in the main security hub, studying screens showing every angle of the venue. Max sat beside her, also watching. The dog had worked tirelessly for hours, screening hundreds of people. He was exhausted, his injured flank clearly bothering him, but he hadn't complained, hadn't hesitated. "Come on," Sarah muttered. "Where are you?" Park appeared beside her. "Agent Collins, we're out of time. The ceremony begins in 20 minutes. We need to make a decision. Do we recommend evacuation?" Sarah's mind raced. Evacuating the G20 Summit would be an unprecedented security failure. It would embarrass every nation involved, potentially destabilize international relations, and hand the Syndicate a propaganda victory even without deploying their weapon. But if 2 operatives were still hidden, if they managed to activate their devices... Max suddenly barked, something he almost never did on mission. Sarah looked at him, then followed his gaze to a monitor showing the main hall's upper-level technical gallery. Two workers in audiovisual uniforms were installing equipment near the ventilation system's main intake. "Zoom in on that feed," Sarah ordered. The image enlarged. The two workers looked legitimate, their movements professional, but there was something in their body language, a tension, a hyper-awareness of their surroundings that triggered Sarah's instincts. Those two, they're wrong. Collins, they've been vetted. They've worked previous summits. Their credentials are fake or stolen. Max detected something. He's never wrong. Sarah was already moving toward the door. "I'm going up there." She ran through the corridor with Max at her side, taking stairs 3 at a time to reach the upper technical gallery. Secret Service agents followed, weapons drawn. They burst into the gallery to find the two workers frozen in place, their hands inside an equipment case. "Hands where I can see them!" Sarah shouted. "Now!" The workers slowly raised their hands. One of them smiled coldly. "Agent Collins, we've heard so much about you and your remarkable dog." Sarah kept her Walter trained on them. "Step away from the equipment. Slowly." "Of course. But you should know. We've already activated the devices. They're on a timer. Even if you arrest us, the virus will deploy in..." He glanced at his watch. 4 minutes, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." Sarah's blood ran cold. She moved to the equipment case and saw 2 aerosol devices, LED timers counting down. 03.47, 03.46, 03.45. "Max," Sarah said urgently, "detection mode, find the control signal." The Belgian Malinois moved around the devices, his sensors active. The dispersal systems would be controlled remotely. There had to be a wireless transmitter somewhere. Max's equipment could detect electromagnetic signals, but finding the specific frequency in a building full of electronic equipment. Max stopped beside a ventilation duct and pawed at it insistently. Sarah understood immediately. She ripped open the duct's access panel and found a small transmitter wired into the ventilation control system. Cut the transmitter, stop the signal, shut down the devices. She had her knife out and sliced through the wires with 30 seconds remaining on the timer. The device's LED displays went dark, disarmed. Sarah sagged against the wall, her heart pounding. Behind her, Secret Service agents were zip-tying the Syndicate operatives while Park called in the all-clear. 6 for 6, Park said quietly. "You found them all, Collins. You and Max saved the G20 Summit." Sarah looked at Max, who was sitting calmly as if disarming a bioweapon attack was just another day at the office. She knelt beside him and wrapped her arms around his neck. "Good boy," she whispered. "Best partner I've ever had." Max's tail wagged. Mission complete. 3 hours later, after debriefings and medical checks and far too much coffee, Sarah sat in a quiet room at MI6's New York station. M appeared on a secure video link, his expression unreadable. "Agent 007, once again, you've exceeded all expectations while giving me enough grey hairs to qualify for additional retirement benefits." Sarah smiled wearily. "Just doing my job, sir. Your job is to conduct intelligence operations, not single-handedly prevent World War III. M paused. "But you did prevent it. The G20 leaders have been briefed. Every nation's intelligence service now understands the scope of the Syndicate's capabilities. This operation has generated more international cooperation than we've seen in decades." "Well done." "Thank you, sir. There's something else. Captain Petrov's daughter has been recovered. She's safe, and Dr. Volkov has agreed to work with MI6 on developing countermeasures to the Syndicate's bioweapon research. We're turning this nightmare into an opportunity." Sarah nodded. "Sometimes victories came in unexpected forms. Get some rest, 07. You've earned it. Both of you." The connection ended. Sarah looked at Max, who was finally, truly sleeping. The dog's chest rose and fell steadily, his paws twitching slightly as he dreamed, chasing rabbits maybe, or stopping jets on runways. Sarah closed her eyes and let exhaustion finally claim her. She'd stopped a kidnapping, secured a bioweapon, prevented a terrorist attack, and saved thousands of lives, all in 3 days. With a Belgian Malinois who trusted her absolutely. James Bond would have been proud. and Sarah Collins, Agent 007, knew she'd earned her number.